Hey Chicken Nugget, Chapter 9. Fletcher was not sure why he had bothered sneaking to the graveyard. It was not like anything was going to happen after all. For one thing, he knew that most commoners found to be adepts often exhibited small signs of special abilities even before they were discovered, like the ability to move small objects or even generate a spark. He was pretty sure that the closest to a special ability he had was a talent for rolling his tongue. It was exciting nonetheless, and perhaps, once he had read the incantation, he would be able to sell it on his next trip to the Elven Front, with no regrets at not having tried it. He would find Rotherham and split the profits with him, of course. After all, it had been a generous gift, and, if anything, it had been Fletcher who was in his debt, and not the other way around. He sat on a broken tombstone and laid the book on an old tree stump a few feet away. He had been of two minds as to whether he should leave the book at home or take it with him. Didrik and his goons might have broken in when he was away, or mugged him if they caught him on the way to the graveyard. In the end, he'd brought it, if only because he was loath to let it out of his sight. The scroll was leathery in his palm, and Fletcher realized with a flash of horror that the symbols must have been carved into the victim's flesh to scar over before skinning him alive. He shuddered at the gruesome thought and tried to hold it with as few fingers as possible. The surface was surprisingly dry and dusty. Ashy. The words on the scroll were nothing more than a list of syllables, more of a music do-re-mi than any kind of orc language. Then again, he wasn't even sure what language summoning used. Perhaps the orcs had translated what he was about to read into their own writings from another language entirely. On top of that, James Baker had written this demon had already been captured by a shaman and somehow gifted. Who knew what that entailed? Still, he would read the words and then get back to his warm bed, happy in the knowledge that he had tried. Di ra go mai lo fa lo ga ra lo. He began to speak, feeling slightly ridiculous and glad nobody was watching him, except for perhaps the ghosts of people long dead. The words flowed from his tongue as if he knew them by heart, and he could not stop even if he wanted to. So great was the draw to speak them loud and clear. A heady, drunken feeling suffused his body like a warm cloak. Yet, instead of the haze that beer brought on, he felt a perfect clarity, like staring into the placid waters of a mountain lake. In Fletcher's mind, the words were more of a mystic equation, each one repeating in varying cycles that were almost melodious in their utterance. Fi, lo, so, ne, di, ro. The words droned on and on relentlessly, until at last he came to the endmost line. As the final words were uttered, he felt his mind shift in a way he recognized. That split-second sensation of razor sharpness that he had experienced in the moment of his arrow's release, yet twice what he had ever felt. It was both familiar and alien to experience the world in such a way. Colors became vivid, almost iridescent. The small winter flowers that grew among the graves seemed to glow with ethereal light, so bright when they, in his vision. As his heart thundered in his chest, he felt a tugging at his mind, at first tentative, then insistent, and so powerful he fell from his perch to his knees. When he lifted his head, he saw the cover of the book glimmer. His eyes widened as the lines of the pentacle glowed. The star within, a circle shimmering with purple radiance. Then, as if it had been there all along, a blue orb of light appeared a few inches above it. It was at first the pinprick of a firefly, then the size of a small boulder in the space of a few seconds. It hovered there, so bright that Fletcher averted his eyes, then covered them with his hands as the radiance intensified to a burning ball as bright as the sun. A roaring like the stoked flames of Burden's forge clamored in his ears, sending waves of pain into his skull. After what seemed like hours, it stopped. In the sudden darkness and silence, Fletcher thought he was dead. He kneeled with his forehead in the soft earth, breathing in great sobbing breaths of its grassy scent to convince himself he was still there. Though the air was now tinged with the sulphurous odor he did not recognize. It was only the sound of a soft chirp that caused him to lift his head. A demon crouched on a small hillock in the grass 2 feet from the book, sitting back on its hind legs. Its tail lashed behind it like that of a feral cat, and its claws gripped the remains of something black and shiny, an insect-like imp of some kind from the other world. It gnawed at it like a squirrel on a nut, crunching into the beetle demon's carapace. The creature was about the size of a ferret, with a similarly lithe body and limbs long enough that it would be able to lope with the grace of a mountain wolf rather than scuttle like a lizard. Its smooth skin was a deep burgundy, like fine wine. The eyes were large and round like those of an owl, fiercely intelligent, and the color of raw amber. To Fletcher's surprise, it had no teeth to speak of, but the snout ended sharp, almost like a river turtle's beak. It used it to snap up the last of the beetle before turning the focus of its gaze to him. Fletcher blanched and scrambled backwards, pressing his back into the broken gravestone. In turn, the creature screeched and scampered behind the stump, bounding sinuously as its tail switched back and forth. Fletcher noticed a sharp spike on the end of it, like a slim arrowhead carved from deer bone. The graveyard was silent, not even a breeze breaking the hush that had been settled over Fletcher's world like a blanket. The sphere of its eye peeked over the lip of the stump suspiciously. When their eyes met, he sensed something strange on the edge of his consciousness, a distinct otherness that seemed to connect him somehow. He felt an intense curiosity that was overpowering in its insistence, even as he was suffused with his own desire to flee. He sucked in another deep, sobbing breath and prepared to run. Suddenly, the demon darted over the stump in a languid leap and onto Fletcher's heaving chest. It peered up at him, cocking its head to one side as if examining his face. He held his breath as it chittered incomprehensibly, then patted him with a foreleg. Fletcher sat there, frozen. Again, the creature trilled at him. Then, to Fletcher's horror, it continued its climb, each claw digging through the fabric of his shirt. It wrapped itself around his neck like a snake, the leathery skin of its belly smooth and warm. The tail whipped past his face, then continued to encircle his nape. Fletcher could feel hot breath by his ear and knew it would throttle him in that instant, a painful death that Didrik had already tried to impart on him. At least they wouldn't have to cart his body very far for a burial, he thought morbidly. As the grip began to tighten, Fletcher closed his eyes, praying it would be quick. Whoa. He summoned a demon. That's wild. Well, that's the end of chapter 9. I'll see you for chapter 10. I love you.